So I have this young mother of two boys who comes to me, and she's really a pretty, very smart woman. She's in her early 20s, but she's got anxiety so bad she can't go to the store with her children. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I've had many people over the years with that same problem. They get panic attacks and so on and so forth.
Right.
And so I'm working with her and I'm trying to teach her what we're teaching everybody listening today. And every time I say, okay, I want you to watch for the next thought, this confused look goes over her face. And finally, one time I said to her, do you want me to tell you what the next thought actually was? And she said, yes, please. What is the next thought? And I said, your next thought was, what if I don't have a thought? And her eyes got big, and all of a sudden she caught on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so fast forward to the next week, we get on our call, and the first thing she says to me, she's back in the car with the boys. There's no more anxiety. It's all gone. And the
Mm-hmm.
first thing she says to me is, that happened so fast. Why did that happen so fast?
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. Yeah, and that's
So,
how it works. It
so
just
I'm not
goes
going
so
to,
fast when you know how to work with yourself.
exactly. So this is what you
Yeah.
need to do if you're listening. We're not going to, how they say, wait until the end and we'll give you the secret. No, here's the secret right here.
This
The
isn't
secret
clickbait.
is all you need to do is just notice your next thought and watch what happens to the voice in your head. Now, I know the title for this says, Spark Awakening in 60 Seconds. And here's a little wisdom drop. You don't need 60 seconds, it just takes an instant
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
to do
60
this
seconds is
exercise.
conservative or generous.
You don't have to build a little altar in the corner. You don't need a yoga mat. We're in
You don't
your
have to
car.
climb to the top of a mountain.
You don't that's right. You don't have to go to the ashram. So all you do is just notice your next thought and then watch what happens to the voice in your head when you become the observer of it.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to
Oh,
Mastering Thought.
sorry. I was observing my last thought. Welcome to Mastering Thought. This is Mark and I'm Christina, and we are here to show how to make your non-conscious patterns more conscious so you have more awareness. We do have a community, but we'll talk about that later. If you're interested, stick with us and press subscribe, and we're going to teach you how to make your uh, life something that you're more in control of.
And Christina is a cranial sacral therapist, and I've been a marriage family therapist for 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I want to introduce you to the two parts of the brain that are active when we do the exercise. Now, this gets a little technical, but I'm going to try to simplify it. So, there's two parts of the prefrontal cortex. That's what PFC stands for. The first part we're talking about is the medial prefrontal cortex. And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
show you where that is in just a second.
Cool.
And then the other part is the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex. And that's actually right here. It's
Right.
at the top front of the brain.
Okay.
And this is
Oh,
basically the difference between thinking and observing.
right. Because your observer's up here.
Yes, the observer is in the dorsal lateral
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex here, and I'm going to show you in a second where the thinker is,
Okay.
because it's a whole complicated thing that has us all messed up.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, when you're paying attention, the thinker takes a break. And have you noticed that before when you're watching your favorite TV show, for instance, there's no thinking going
Right.
on?
Right.
It's because you're
You're just in the
focused and
zone.
concentrating.
Right.
However, when you stop doing a task, the thinker starts to ruminate. And there's our gentleman ruminating there. Does he look like he's ruminating?
He does. He looks a bit uncomfortable, honestly.
That's what we're going for.
We're going to teach you all about your prefrontal cortex. Okay, buddy? You're going to have a chance again to beat this.
He needs to join the thought watching community so we can tell him the secret and work with it. All right, so here's a slice of the brain.
Okay.
And this up here is the front of the brain, and this is the back of the brain. And I
Okay.
didn't show the entire brain because we're just going to talk about this other stuff. So
We're zooming in.
this area, this whole area, is a part of the brain called the limbic system. Limbic. And I would encourage everybody watching to go online and take about 5 minutes and look the limbic system up, because it's really a critical part of the brain and it's trying to control us all the time.
Yeah, its main drive is survival, even if that's not a problem for you.
That's right. The limbic system is, it's fight or flight, anger, fear. It's the part of the brain we share with other animals, so it's all about survival, and all emotions come from the limbic system, and it's almost completely wired up by the time we're 5 or 6 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
So the memories that are located in this part of the brain are all from early childhood emotional learning.
Okay. Deep-rooted, so to speak.
They're deep-rooted in the brain and in history.
Yeah, in our own history, yeah.
All right, so one of the most critical parts of the limbic system is this right here. And this is called the, I'm not spelling it right.
Are you not?
Amygdala.
It looked right.
It's the amygdala. How do you spell the amygdala?
I don't know. I'm going to look it up.
I'll put it down here when we find it, but it's right here.
Amygdala. You did spell it right.
Okay.
Gdala. Yeah.
Now, the limbic system is really critical because the amygdala, because when you take in a thought that's triggering, the fight or flight is right there.
Oh.
And so it all starts with the amygdala. Now, so that is, I would say that's where we experience emotional pain.
Yeah.
Okay, now this gets complicated because this structure here is called the cingulate gyrus.
Mm-hmm.
And this part of it over here is called the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex.
Right.
Okay, now what does this do? Well, it takes the pain from the amygdala and it evaluates the pain and turns it basically into suffering.
Mm-hmm. It turns it into your story for you. It interprets your stuff into a story.
Your story comes right here. This is the medial lateral prefrontal cortex.
Right next to each other. Look at that.
That's why I did this diagram, because I thought this was so fascinating, because they're all super connected here.
Right. And I'm noticing how close the amygdala is to the brainstem. So it's just, yeah, it makes sense why your whole body would get affected immediately, that much quicker, I guess.
Right. So what happens is these parts here kind of team up and they create this awful, painful, suffering narrative based on whatever triggering thought came in and activated this.
Right.
Okay, so let me make this a little easier to understand. Hopefully you can see this okay. So here's kind of the flow. So down here we have the limbic system, and this is where we get emotional pain, or what we call triggers. You hear people say they've been triggered. Mm-hmm. Another way to think of it is it's the unfinished business. Oops. This is the unfinished business from our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that then communicates with the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the suffering generator. And it amplifies the pain. And then
Okay.
it's connected to the medial prefrontal cortex, where we have self-reflection, perception, and basically it's a mirage, and it's the thinker, and this is where we create the actual narrative itself. This is the story, and the
So so when you're not awake yet, really the unfinished business of your childhood kind of runs as like your motivator, your non-conscious motivator.
exactly, that's exactly what's
Yeah.
happening. It's not a good thing. I mean, this is why we human
Right.
beings are not in good shape,
Right.
because we're basically being run by the emotional part of the brain that has the perception of a 5-year-old, and it just produces no end of struggles.
Yeah, for real.
So let's go back to this for a second.
Yeah.
The one other thing I wanted to say is the medial prefrontal cortex. I don't know why that does that.
It only
It's
does it
this.
when you're drawing.
Okay, so the medial prefrontal cortex is the main node in the default mode network.
Uh-huh.
Now, what's important about this is the default mode network is the part of the brain that kind of shuts down or shuts off a little bit when you meditate, when you take psychedelics, when you
Right.
do mindfulness. And this has all been proven in studies, by the way. This is not
Right.
just folklore.
Right.
And when you do those things, this other part of the brain up here, the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, has enhanced activity. How can we relate to that? Well, that's where awareness, perspective, this is where we can actually observe reality. And this is the main node of the task positive network.
Okay.
Okay, now these two networks are negatively correlated. So this is why when you do
Right.
the exercise, when you become the observer, the the default mode network activity and the narration, the voice in your head, dramatically drops.
Right.
Basically stops.
Right. So then the negative correlation is when one is on, the other is off.
Right. And I've had some
Yeah.
people correct me. No, they don't really go off, but the observable activity definitely goes off. I've never had anybody I've trained to do this that said, well, the voice gets quieter. When they actually notice it, they realize the voice just shut off.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Okay, so
Yeah. And that's been my experience as well.
it's kind of this teeter-totter effect.
Yeah.
When one is up, the other one's down. When the other one's up, the other one's down. And we go back and forth depending on what we're doing. If we're observing, the task positive network is turned on, and where the activity is up here in the dorsal lateral. When we're thinking and talking to ourselves and ruminating and running the worst case scenarios, then the medial prefrontal cortex and the default mode network are up, and the awareness level in the dorsal lateral is down. Okay, now here's where it gets sticky. So here's another way of thinking about this whole thing. So what we've done is we look at this stuff I've outlined here, and it becomes what we identify as me,
This is mine. This is how I
or
am.
or the ego.
Okay.
So when you look at your ego, you're basically seeing this thing called me in the head that we all relate to. And we absolutely believe this is me.
Right. We're
But this
born
is
thinking it's us.
in general, this is a function of the limbic system turning, pain into suffering and then telling a story about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
the thing I should say
It's
is
just a
that
thought.
well, that's the other thing. Even when the thought is not emotional, the medial prefrontal cortex is still heavily involved in it.
Okay.
So a lot of it is that it's the same mechanism. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I think so, but you asking that makes me wonder if I'm missing a point.
Well, the point is that even a non-emotional thought activates basically the same systems and it talks to us in our heads.
Oh, okay. So that's why in the exercise we utilize non-emotional thoughts.
Then that's a very good point because we don't want the amygdala activated
Right.
because we
Especially
don't
while we're
want
practicing something new.
that's right. We don't want to deal with all the emotions, so that's why
Yeah.
we practice on trivial everyday thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, what's a trivial thought? Oh, I need to get my hair colored on Saturday.
What color are you gonna do?
Or, I wonder if it's going to snow tomorrow.
I want to brush my hair. That's one that for whatever reason my brain seems to go to.
So when we go back here and we contrast this objective me with the awareness that's coming out of the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, that awareness I call the subjective I.
Mm-hmm.
And to my way of thinking and all the research I've done in my personal experience is when you move into this part of the brain, that is the subjective experience.
Okay. Because
And
you're the only one that can have it? Is that why?
no, because there's no object there. There's only the subject called I, the being, the
Mm-hmm.
awareness. See,
Mm-hmm.
awareness is undifferentiated. See, there's no mark that's being aware. There's just undifferentiated awareness.
Okay.
And Christina, you've described several times when you're doing body work with somebody, you just lose yourself.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That is a move into the top of the brain here where there is no sense of self. There's no me in the head that's active. There's only
Right.
you, the subjective I that's completely totally involved in the present moment.
Right. Well, and it's kind of interesting that you say that. So part of the reason I think I lose myself is that I'll make like an electric circuit with whoever I'm working on because we're both electric beings, and I see myself like becoming part of this bigger thing. But with you saying there's no difference in awareness, like that Mark is aware, but there's also awareness other places. I almost wonder if we could make a circuit with that, if that
So
makes any
what I'm
sense.
saying is, the same thing is true when you're in the flow.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a flow state, there's no sense of self.
Right.
There's no sense of me that's being the therapist. You're just spontaneously in the moment, and that awareness of being in the moment is undifferentiated. It has no name. There's no personage that's involved in that.
Okay.
You're just completely, totally involved in the moment.
Yeah.
You know,
You
the
lose
same thing is true
identity.
for exactly. There's no identity
Mm-hmm.
in that space. When you move into the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, there is only awareness. There's no identity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you said that
Okay.
word. That's the word that captures what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Now, can I just ask one other question from the subjective I and
Yeah,
the objective we or
yeah.
me? What made you choose me and I?
Uh,
Like,
be,
why is one designated as one?
that's a good question. Just through my own experience and a lot of reading, that me implies mine. It's to me, it's the ego. You know, it's the way the narrative is crafted in your head. I
Yeah.
need to wash my car. I need, I'm having a bad day. It's all about me, me, me.
Right. Well, and actually, I'm appreciating the way you structured that too. Maybe this is nerdy, but I really like grammar. But with the word like me, that is typically an object. Like we don't say me wants to go to the store. We say, you know, I need to go to the store. But yeah. Anyway, I
Yeah,
can.
I understand, but I just
Yeah,
like the word me that goes with all this stuff here.
yeah,
It's the me that's suffering. It's the me in the head that's self-reflecting. It's the me that has a perception. But when you stand back, you realize me turns out to be an object.
right.
The sense of self is an object in awareness that we
Yeah,
call me.
yeah. That's cool.
Now, I guess if you want to have an argument about this, put it in the comments because I certainly respect other people who have opinions that differ from mine. That's just the way it feels
Yeah.
comfortable for me to describe it. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I like it. Thank you for explaining it.
All right. So the question now becomes one of identification. Why have we mistaken ourselves to be the voice in our heads and this feeling of me?
Hmm. I mean, it is human nature.
That's exactly right. But look at
Yeah,
this. So we've got all this going on down here in the ego mind,
yeah,
and it's drama, there's mental noise, there's a voice in the head that's talking. I think it's natural for us to assume that's who we are.
hmm.
Whereas the
Especially because it
awareness, go ahead.
talks to you. Well, I was going to say, especially because that voice talks to you like it's you, telling you what you want and feel, and
That's right.
it feeds you the feelings.
Well, and it's been with you since the time you learned language.
Yeah,
So
and
it feels
before,
like
yeah,
you and it sounds like you. It
feelings.
has your tone and timbre. Why wouldn't you assume it's you?
Yeah,
However, that's that's the problem because we've been stuck on our heads,
right.
and yeah, this is the problem with human beings.
Yeah,
So we have mistaken ourselves to be the self in the head that's talking to us all the time,
right,
and and that makes sense because the awareness is actually silent. So
right.
there's no real activity coming from awareness for us to identify with. So this is kind of a natural mistake that we've made.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Right.
a tragic mistake.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting for me is when I'm working on a client and they go into that deep space. Can you go back to the last slide?
Yeah. This one? No. This one.
Yeah. Okay. So that silent awareness, like for a lot of people, including in my experience too, like on myself, when we go into those deeper spaces where we do turn off like the voice in our head, we do realize that the silent awareness has been there. It has been accompanying us. It was just like,
Right.
you know, something in a messy room, and all that mess stops you from seeing the thing that is there,
Right.
the thing that you want.
Right. And
Yeah.
so what you're saying basically in my interpretation is this is appearing inside of this. So
I would say they appear
awareness.
together, but the silent awareness is harder to point out because of the drama and mental noise.
So I'm gonna say that everything appears inside of awareness,
Sure. Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is because, awareness, is the field, the undifferentiated, I'm not saying this right, undifferentiated field,
Undifferentiated.
who we really are,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not actually the drama and the mental noise and so forth.
Oh, that's a relief.
Yeah. All right. So here's the exercise. The exercise is to become aware of awareness. And when we become aware of awareness, we disidentify with the voice in our heads, and we experience an awakening moment.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I hope going through how the brain creates all this kind of gives everybody an idea how the brain science can take us beyond just simple mindfulness. There's actually
Mm-hmm.
something happening. There's a mechanism in there
Yeah.
that we can tweak that makes this happen very quickly.
Right. It truly is a rewiring
Well,
of your brain. I mean,
speaking of that, let me go through this and then tell me your experience. So
okay.
what we want to do here is we want to practice separation from thought by noticing a transitory, trivial thought. And a thought is the voice in your head that sounds like you talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you only have to do this 2 or 3 times a day, and it doesn't take 60 seconds. It takes just an instant or two.
Yeah.
Don't
15 max.
anticipate. What's that?
15 seconds max for like
Yeah,
once you get your routine going.
right.
Yeah.
Don't analyze. Don't anticipate an outcome. Don't look for an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you notice the voice in your head, it just goes away, and that's the end of the exercise.
That's it. So
And basically, what you're doing when you do that is you're altering the relationship between these two parts of the prefrontal cortex.
mm-hmm.
And when that gets rewired, this awakening occurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good.
Okay.
It's funny. Oh, do you want me to tell the story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like it was funny because when I first was doing the exercise, I did not listen to the don't analyze, don't like I didn't realize it, but I was negotiating with the thought after. And then once I realized like, oh, really the whole point is just to turn off the voice in your head, and then
Uh-huh.
that's means success. That made it a lot easier. And I was just in mid conversation. It was like early December of 2022, I think. And I was in a conversation with my husband, and he had asked me a question that I guess I had felt like, oh, I need to be defensive a little bit about how I answer this. And in that moment, my brain realized, like, no, you don't. This is not who you are. And all of a sudden, like everything opened up in my head, and I realized, like I was able to kind of see my ego as a character inside of myself rather than being me.
Right.
And I think that was only like 2 or 3 weeks after I started doing the exercise correctly. And my life has been different ever since. It's been a lot easier to not get caught up in the drama and mental noise, to
Right.
realize like, oh, this is a story, this is just a thought, this is something I'm
Right.
choosing to believe, it's not objectively true.
Uh-huh.
And that was really the beginning of a lot of things in our life, my whole family's life getting better.
So what you just described is exactly this, that this was the character,
Yeah.
and this was the container where that
Yeah.
character was having that drama.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and so what you have described is something that happens all the time. The people I work with, they
Mm-hmm.
do a little bit. They do a little bit of this thought watching, and then they're in the middle of an argument with their husband or whatever, and all of a sudden they feel like they're outside of themselves looking in.
Yeah, it comes together.
Yep.
Well, and it makes it so easy to just realize like that is the voice in my head. It is not me. And
Right.
that's a very powerful statement to make about yourself.
So this is a question I get all the time, and hopefully
Yeah.
we've addressed this. If I'm not the voice in the head, who am I? And the answer clearly is you're the awareness that's watching.
Mm-hmm.
And when you
Right.
realize that's who you really are, an awakening occurs. It's a spiritual, emotional, and psychological awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely undeniable when it happens.
Yeah. It
And it
felt
results
like
in,
everything changed.
well, and what you said also is true. It results in a permanent knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So try that exercise. If you need some support, reach out to us. Consider joining the Thought Masters online community. There'll be a link below. You can contact us. We'll be happy to help you. And if you want to join the community, there's a link for the community. You can scan the QR code if you want to interact with us through a form that takes you there. Anything else in closing?
I don't think so. What about you?
Well, I think this is a, a nice way to look at this. Hopefully, for people who want it to be more down to earth and less airy fairy. There's
Mm-hmm.
actually something happening in our neurology that's changing. And when you
Mm-hmm.
understand that, you can make this awakening happen much, much quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very inspiring way to exist.
It's totally different. It's a different way of
Yeah.
living.
I wonder if that is like well, it makes sense actually. Like you're beginning to go outside of survival and into thriving,
You're
and
basically
I like,
living in reality.
yeah. Yeah. Lots of potential.
So if you want to live in reality and have questions, comments below or reach out to us.
I love it. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye bye.